Welcome to the Beyond Atheism podcast with me, Nathan Alexander, and my co-host Todd Tavares. This podcast moves beyond questions of God's existence to ask, what's next in a godless world? If you're enjoying the show so far, remember to like and subscribe, rate and review, and consider supporting us on Patreon. Beyond Atheism is produced and distributed by Atheist United Studios.
Today, we are joined by Dr. Timothy Stacey. As an activist researcher at Utrecht University, he focuses on exploring how we can use tools from culture and religion to inspire transformations in the very centers of Western power. This research incorporates networking, organizing, developing rituals, and through undertaking documentary and ethnographic research to understand where opportunities might emerge for political and ecological transformation. The latest result of this work is the new book, Saving Liberalism from Itself, The Spirit of Participation. Tim, welcome to Beyond Atheism.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks, Tim. Really looking forward to talking more with you. Just to begin, well, I wanted to ask, sort of as a way to get into your biography, whether you consider yourself a somewhere person or an anywhere person. And maybe you can tell us what those terms mean, and then sort of just which one you think you are.
Yeah, cool question. So this starts with a work from David Goodhart. I believe it's called The Road to Somewhere, where he distinguishes between somewheres and anywheres. And he kind of says that this is a huge fault line that's opening up, and people have since used it to understand the rise of populism. Basically, the idea is that anywheres are the so-called liberal elite, people who have universal values that are easily transportable to different places and contexts. Whereas somewheres are people whose values are deeply embedded in their loyalties to places and people that they've grown up with. And so you can't simply transport that value somewhere else because the very act of moving is to sacrifice that value in a way. So one of my biggest struggles in my research and writing is that I think I feel like the very thing I'm criticizing a lot of the time. So, yeah, I'm trying to learn how to be a somewhere. I'm trying to learn how to navigate between what I see as quite universal values in a place and amongst people. And you know, the academic life doesn't make that easy, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
So, yeah.
Now, so when you think about it, do you find that it's a bit of almost like code switching where you change sort of your, not so much your beliefs, but your maybe the way you communicate, the way you relate to people when you say like you're part of a group that is a lot of anywhere people in a place like a university, and when you interact with people who are more sort of local, people who are somewhere people? Or is this, or do you find that it is a major roadblock in terms of personality and our ability to relate to one another?
I think that's really interesting. So certainly there's some kind of code switching, diluting or translating of what I think in an academic context, in a local context. But actually, what I really meant is that both the aspirations of this profession and its insecurities make it hard to be rooted in one place. So what does it mean to move up? What does it mean to succeed? Those are things that largely, you know, I feel like I can control. I can tell myself, you know what, I don't necessarily want to become a professor at this or that institution. I just want to be embedded in a place.
Right.
But that question is also, that decision is also taken away from me by the increasing insecurity of academia.
Yeah. That was something Todd and I were talking about this last night, and it just like there is sort of this question like whether it's if there's sort of people who are naturally somewhere or anywhere people, or whether it's like just by circumstances we're sort of more and more forced to being anywhere people. I mean, like um, I think both Todd and I have moved around in search of jobs and things like this, and it's not necessarily by choice. Um, but so and then you maybe like along the way you convince yourself that maybe I am an anywhere person rather than a somewhere person, but it's really just a matter of necessity or whatever.
Yeah, economic necessity.
Yeah, right.
But this is like for us, it's also well, I don't know. First of all, do you put much stock in those classifications? Is it something that really guides your research, or is it just
Um,
another point along the road?
well, for me, it's something that kind of annoyed me, actually.
Mm.
So in that sense, it guided my research.
Mm.
Right.
This idea that all of a sudden people who aspire to universal values that they think everybody has the right to access only have those beliefs because they're completely disconnected and alienated from a place. I found that quite aggravating. I do think there is something interesting in that distinction, and it is something that needs to be explored. Hence the book in a way. But the fact that it annoyed me was also a reason that I was writing, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah, and just maybe to make it sort of more practical, in your book you talk about your work with or your research on this group called the Metro Vancouver Alliance. And I mean, I think this is one thing that will be valuable, like, more generally for us, because we're thinking about ways of, to create community, to build community and so on. And I think this group is one, one example of how to do it. Yeah, maybe just talk about this group, how they work, what are their sort of guiding principles and so on.
Yeah, thanks. So, if you don't mind, I'd like to first of all describe why I wanted to look at just one group of people, and that's because, like, in the tradition that I'm interested in, these discussions can get very philosophical very quickly.
Mhm.
Uh, and the issue for me is that when we have this discussion in abstraction, we always end up being these kind of armchair philosophers who decide, well, what are the values that are important for our society? What are the stories that those values are captured in? How can we make sure that everybody is reading those stories? And what I was interested in instead is thinking, let's start with the people we admire. Not the academics who might be having very good ideas, but who aren't necessarily devoting their lives to good causes. Let's start instead with the stories of people who actually do that, who actually give their time to these causes. And doing that in a lot of detail requires spending time with just one group. And so that for me was Metro Vancouver Alliance, a group of people who really inspired me. They operate in the industrial areas foundation tradition of community organizing, which was initially started by Saul Alinsky. And basically, the idea is that you build power within a community in order to act on common causes. And they define power simply as the ability to bring people to an event or into an action. And so, what that means is that you end up focusing on a whole range of organizations that might not necessarily always work together. So, churches and gurdwaras, mosques, synagogues, trade unions, schools, environmental activist groups, anyone that has power. And what I love most about them is you bring all of these groups together with these very different perspectives, very different aims and agendas. And the first thing you ask is, what do we have in common? And so it ends up being very bread and butter things that they work on. It's improving the wages of workers, fixing the lights on city streets, improving access to healthcare. And working together on those things requires a lot of compromises. But most of all, when you're working together with the only principle being that you need collective power, you have to work with people that are very, very different from you. And so you see people having these moments of revelation where they learn that this person whose values on paper might disgust them, they're still a person who can be quite inspiring in a different context, and they can find an overlapping agenda and work together on that. And they're still allowed to hate them when it comes to the issue that that irritates them about that person. But that doesn't mean they can't work together on this.
Which I
Mm-hmm.
believe Alinsky called it dog shit problems, as in like the too much dog shit on the street, and that politics aren't these haughty issues. They're not these big federal issues that are national in scope.
Mm.
It's the things that affect you on a very day to day basis. So
Yeah, right.
yeah, and this is one of the things we've talked about on the show with other people is a lot of when we see atheist groups forming. So this is our particular issue is a lot of atheist groups come and go. They have incredibly high turnover, both in like the groups themselves and in membership. And the things that are very commonly cited for this is like, look, we have a very high regard for personal freedom, right? Like that, this is important, especially people who leave very coercive and oppressive religions. They really value that, and they have a tremendous distaste for conformity. So what I'm thinking about is like, okay, if we see this in other groups, right, where we see acts of creating in-group solidarity, right? People come together and they work together and they stand up for each other. How is that built in the face of, that these are voluntary associations that people can come and go as they please? And what do people have to do people have to give things up, their individuality, to build this sort of community?
Okay, do they have to? I don't know. Um, I do think to some extent you have to give your individuality over to the collective. But I'm thinking in terms of political causes, and I'm also involved in activist causes myself. I'm very interested in the ritual transformation you go through every time you enter an activist space. The way that Metro Vancouver Alliance does it and IAF organizations often do it is that even when you first introduce yourself, you introduce yourself primarily through the institution that you're representing and the people that you're bringing to this collective. So I feel like that already is an equalizer and a giving up of ego. It's not, hey, I'm Tim, I'm an academic, I researched this, or hey, I'm somebody else, I'm a lawyer. It's, hey, I'm this is my name, this is the institution I'm representing. So there's that kind of anchoring yourself in a collective. But I also feel that there's a really important ritual in these organizations, which is the one-to-one. And that's this wonderful process where I think you kind of tell yourself into a movement and into a collective. And that's for me this great threshold between the liberal individual and the need for a collective movement, because you tell your very personal story and they'll actually help you learn to tell your personal story. So, not just, oh, I care about justice, therefore I'm here, but what are the things that happen in your life that, screwed you up in your own particular way and brought you here and made you care about this movement. But the telling of that personal story to another person who's listening attentively within a context of a broader movement of people acting together in solidarity is also a way of telling yourself into a group, right? You're telling the story of how you became a member of this collective. And I think you can follow kind of standard ritual theory there in terms of Van Gennep or Turner, in terms of the idea that there's the individual you who's being let go of through that telling. And you're entering into that liminal space, waiting for a response from the other. And you're coming out on the other side as this member of a collective. And you feel simultaneously embraced as the individual and more powerful as part of that group.
Hmm. Yeah, I think this is one area probably like atheist or secular groups probably struggle with, because I think for most atheists and non-religious people and so on, I think like, individuality is such an important part, and like almost kind of a resistance to joining a collective is almost maybe one thing that led them to become an atheist in the first place. But I think there's also, I mean, there does seem nonetheless to be a desire to create communities, and like, and I think maybe some people like atheist organizers or whatever are just not totally sure how to do it. Um, and one thing well, I think, in your book you talk about the importance of things like ritual, myth, magic, tradition, and I think maybe we could get into some of these. I mean, I think maybe for some of the listeners, like uh, their uh, their ears are,
Yeah, burning.
whatever.
Yeah,
When they hear, yes, when they hear things like magic and myth and so
spirit.
on. Um,
Yeah.
yeah. So I don't know. Maybe we can just maybe almost just go through them in turn. And well, you already talked a little bit about
And
ritual.
yeah, it sounded like
Um,
you're talking about
yeah,
myth,
I don't.
right? Like how we describe ourselves and make
Yeah,
our story. So yeah, just yeah, can you let's get into these.
yeah. I just go
Yeah,
ahead.
so tell us more about what you mean by myth.
Yeah. So first of all, I kind of want to add that I'm totally with you on people finding these uncomfortable, and that's actually why I find them such fun categories to
Mhm.
play
Right.
around with. So
Uh-huh.
I started off in my PhD research really interested in myth as a kind of boundary category that helps us overcome a kind of religious, secular, belief based versus rational kind of binary. Um, and I started to think through, well, what is a myth really? And so I think of it as simply stories of great events and characters that inspire us to take action in the world. What separates them just from ordinary stories, though, I have a few things. One is that they are existential, so they answer important questions about who we are and why we're here. They're normative, so they offer a vision about how the world is, should, or could be. And then one that's less to do with content than the impact that they actually have. And that's that they somehow have a way of cutting through our rational, choice based self and forcing us to be inspired by them. And so that for me is this quality of where you don't necessarily get to choose what stories inspire you, right? That there are some stories, some characters that for some reason stick with you and shape who you are and your identity. And there's an almost mystical quality to that. Why does that character resonate with me? Is it because there's some underlying archetype of a hero that inspires everybody, no matter where they're from? I don't know. Or is it because of the way I was raised or some shit thing that happened to me? So yeah, it's hard to put your finger on it.
Mm. But when you talk about this myth making, it's true, right? Or it's at least as true as something can be. We're not. It's not myth making in the sense that we're taking that it's fictional, right?
Oh no, yeah, that's an important point. So actually, I don't really make a distinction there. It could be fictional. It could be true and very much grounded in reality. And here's where people might get annoyed with me. I don't necessarily think that one is better than the other either.
Mm,
So for me, the question is, does it inspire you to do good stuff or does it inspire you to do bad
mm,
stuff?
Yeah,
Not is it
right.
true or is it false?
yeah. Well, we're
Mm,
speaking from a
mhm,
community that has a normative association with truth, right? Like we really value things to be true, especially
Yeah.
because like what we see as what we are not is something that bases itself on fictional myths. But what you're saying is that it doesn't matter. When you say it doesn't matter, it means like if you what you value is truth and what you value is historical accuracy, then that's the shape that your myth making will take. That myth making
Yeah.
ought to reflect that.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. Yeah, I think so.
I mean, is that something you see when you work with groups and even like their personal myths? Like nobody's, getting up there. It's like, well, I was born from an egg, and then I floated down the river until I was carried
right.
away by a bird. Like their personal
Yeah.
myths are their history that they order and structure in a way that shows the values that they want to promote. Right. That's what we should expect.
Yeah, so that's really interesting because I'm now actually working with climate activists and people using
Mm,
speculative
mhm.
science fiction, and
Okay.
so there is a kind of making up of stories of origins and futures that inspires people. But no, in terms of the book itself and in terms of the Industrial Areas Foundation, it's much closer to what we would call, yeah, a true story of your personal history. I do get into
Mhm,
discussions about what counts as a true story in parts of the book,
mhm.
but
Yeah.
yeah, without getting into debates around, the constructed nature of identity, I'm quite
Yeah.
happy to
Yeah.
say yes, this is truer than saying I'm
Yeah.
born
Yeah.
as an egg.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, Todd, yeah, Todd and I were a few days ago. We were interviewed on another podcast, but he asked about our sort of deconversion stories, I guess, and I think maybe there's some like mythical aspect to it. I mean, not in the sense of being untrue, but like when you sort of tell these stories about yourself, they begin to kind of take on like kind of a element of like being constructed in some way. Where it's like you've passed through sort of like several kind of main points or something
Sort
like
of myth
that.
making.
Um, yeah, each time you tell the story, it gets sort of refined, and then it moves. Well, it's hard to say whether it's true or not. I mean, like how like your memories diverge or what, or like you forget things, and then you remember the way you've told the story before, and that's your sort of your memory of it. Um,
Yeah.
yeah.
No, and
Um,
I tell my story in activist settings and end up recording it in this book as well. And when I think
mhm.
about my family and friends I grew up with reading it, I often think like, does that feel like, would that
Right.
story resonate with them? It definitely feels true to me when I'm telling it in one setting. Uh,
Mm,
Yeah. Yeah.
so yeah.
mm.
Hmm.
I mean,
Yeah.
there are two parts of that I hadn't thought about in terms of myth making. One being that it can be future oriented as well. So it doesn't, that part. And the other thing being like I think this comes up a bit in the book that like emotional truth is just as important, right? When we
Yeah.
So yeah, walk us through that a little bit. When we think about emotional truth, how that's different from, I think, is it rational truth that's the opposite or the counterpoint?
Mm. Yeah, so in the final chapter, I talk about three types of truth. What are they? Rational truth, Rational truth, confessional truth, and compassionate truth. So I'm not necessarily setting them up as binaries or opposites, but rather just as three interesting strands that I think are important in processes of community building, and the third of which is kind of underrated in liberal settings, I feel. So, yeah, rational truth is the scientific, factual truth that we've been talking about. Confessional truth is, it's true for me, or, that person is speaking their truth, and that's beautiful. Compassionate truth is the feeling of trueness you experience when listening to another person's story, their suffering, their hopes, their aspirations, and it resonates with you and feels true. It actually, I started to think of it because I was listening to one of my research participants talking, and they said they were at this large gathering where an unemployed person had got up and explained their troubles. And he explained that, yeah, I just noticed people responding to this, caring for them in a way that was very true. And I started to think, what does he mean by true in this context? And I suppose it meant truly human, truly sympathetic. So yeah, I started to reflect on that.
Hmm. Yeah. So I think, yeah, probably many of the listeners would be on board with that idea, but maybe coming to the idea of magic, maybe
Yeah.
they would be
How
like,
is
well, I don't know about I don't know if I
how
can
true is
go
magic?
this far. Yeah. So talk to us about magic.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah, so magic for me, again, is, well, okay, it's one of these fun boundary concepts to play around
Hmm.
with. But I also felt like it's a really important word in activist settings. People are often talking about certain experiences as being magical. Um, the feeling of achieving consensus in an anarchist collective with a bunch of people you've never met before, that feels magical. Um, the feeling that a small group of people can take to the streets and actually change something feels magical. And I started to think about, what does this really mean? And I think it's this sense that a mysterious power resides in an object or action that goes against the odds, or for which there isn't really evidence. And what I love about this is when you start getting into the question of evidence, you say, well, what then counts as valid evidence? So I got really hung up on this idea of, Tina, there is no alternative. So in neoliberal settings, there's this reification, this rendering of this is the fact, this is real, um, of capitalist economic truths. So the way someone like David Cameron used this term, I thought was especially good, because he was good at doing it with this kind of sympathetic air. And his point was kind of, yeah, well, of course, we'd all love to
Mhm.
have
Yeah.
social democracy,
Yeah.
Hmm.
really. But there is no alternative
Yeah.
to
Right.
the truth of
Yes.
um,
Hmm.
neoliberal
Hmm.
Yeah.
economics. And I think many of us have come to believe that after 30, 40 years. Even somebody like me, um, who strongly resists that, both in my writing and practice. It's somehow there's this power to that logic when it's presented on a political stage. Part of me is always thinking, yeah, I guess so. Yeah,
Mm.
yeah,
Hmm.
I can see
Hmm.
where they're coming from. They certainly look sympathetic. Um,
Yeah.
and so So for me, magic is those moments, as I put it in the book, where this thin veneer, when this thin slit, opens up in the veneer of there is no alternative, this kind of
Mm,
alternative dimension suddenly opens up to you, and you feel like you could almost touch it or step through into this other world. A
hmm.
Christian research participant during my PhD actually called this little drops of heaven. And for
Mm,
him, it was like when somebody finds a wallet and they find a way to get it back to you, and all the money's still in there, or any small moment or act of kindness
right.
where you think, maybe humans are actually okay. And so
Hmm. Yes.
for
Yeah.
me, I was interested in that as magical moments.
Mm,
And then what does that
hmm.
mean for identity and activism if those things are so important? And again, for me, I say early on in the book, but it's important for me to restate anytime I have a conversation like this, that I'm not in any way trying to kind of, I don't know, bust atheism or something and suggest like, well,
Right.
actually, it's got myths and
Uh,
rituals and magic.
yeah.
And so it's
Yeah.
super problematic itself. Instead, what I'm trying to say is, hey, these categories seem to be important, whatever context we're operating out of. And so we should reflect on them and think about how to use them um, in ways that we find positive.
Mm. So, I
Hmm.
mean, the good thing is we're not talking about Harry Potter or crystals or making potions or anything. That part's out. It sounds like you're talking about it as like a lost feeling or this moment when the impossible feels possible suddenly. Um,
Mm,
and
hmm.
like I can relate to that, like moments of like just spontaneity where everything just seems to come together, right? And you can appreciate that moment. And you understand it as something like, you can never put this in a bottle. You can't put it in a box. You can't buy it. You can't make it. This is just something that came together and it's fantastic. But how is this? Is there a way that we can use magic in this way, not just like understand the appreciation of it? Is there a way to implement it, right? And I don't mean like us casting a spell or writing a sigil. How would we actually use magic to sustain participation?
Yeah, so probably the language I'm going to use around this now is quite inspired by Simone Kotva's work on magic. I hadn't actually read that when I wrote this chapter, but I now see that I could have learnt a lot from her while writing it,
It's always
which
the
is the
way, isn't
idea
it?
of magic. Yeah, exactly. Oh, such things are very annoying. But anyway, she talks about magic as a kind of attentiveness. And I realized that's something I was really lingering on in that chapter as well. How can we harness it? Magic often arises in moments when we um, deliberately stop paying attention to our instrumental goals and think instead about the relationships and emotions in a room or that are being developed between you and a particular person or a group. And so, what I was reflecting on is that a lot of people working for Metro Vancouver Alliance were talking about how left wing politics and trade union politics could also, like the other political movements they were criticizing, could also fail to capture those kind of magical feelings and moments because you're so focused on trying to convince this person to believe what you want them to vote for the person that you want them to engage in the campaign that you want them to, that you lose touch with the beauty that you are speaking to another human being, and there's something resonating between you. And the thing is that it's moments like that that actually give people the energy to come back the next day. Uh, so if you lose touch with that deeply, mystical, exciting, emotional element, uh, then you might have a very good treatise on what should be done, but not
Mm.
not anybody who's actually willing to work with you on it.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's
right.
amazing because as you're discussing that, I'm reminded of something from a long time ago, where it was it's like a protest planning meeting, lots of different groups, and one of the someone was appointed to be the vibe checker, which is just like, oh my god, this is the dumbest,
Right.
this is the dumbest thing. And I think they had like a silly hat and they sat in the front. But then when it got like during the planning, things got started to get contentious and a little heated. And then she jumped up. It's like, okay, time for a vibe check, and starts moving around and gets everybody up and acting very silly, right? And just wiggling about. And then all of that, all of the heatedness just kind of melted away, and we were able to get back to work. And that sounds like part of what you're describing here is like dropping the instrumentality, getting in touch with where we are, remembering that we're all in the same room, and building this sense of unity out of difference. So that's, yeah. So okay, so there is, it's more than, I see how it can be a feeling, and it's something to be appreciated and something sort of implemented without being a you know magic, wizards and warlocks and stuff.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I increasingly come to question the difference between them. Um, but um, but yeah, no, I think in terms of this discussion, I'm happy with that.
Hmm.
Uh,
Right.
Are they
because
present?
like
Yeah.
when you're well, I was just thinking when you're on an activist march, one of the things that we chant a lot with Extinction Rebellion is "We are unstoppable. Another world is possible." Right? Something that you chant at pretty much every activist movement that ever existed, and it's important to state that it's in almost every movement because many of those movements are unstoppable, and they did not prove that another world was possible. But I bet for many people standing there in that moment, it felt true. And so you were kind of doing this magical incantation in that moment and really believing in it, even though your rational self thinks, yeah, but it's probably not going to work out, is it?
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
But that
Yeah.
kind of feeds into the idea
Yeah.
of ritual, doesn't it? Where if it happens again and again, how else is that a ritual in the way that you're thinking about it?
Yeah, I think of a ritual as something that is trying to capture that magical feeling and harness it a lot of the time. I think the same with love at a wedding. Love is magical. Um, and we tell ourselves we're going to be together forever and, so on and so forth. And I still believe that with my wife. But who knows? There may come a time, like statistics suggest that, from my more rational perspective, there may come a time when I begin to question that.
Yeah.
Um, but from my guy who went through that ritual perspective, I believe in the magical power that was harnessed in that moment.
Mm. I mean, to put a rational spin on it, though, which is not necessary, but I'm going to do it anyway, is that statistically speaking, apparently, they're finding that the more witnesses of a marriage, the longer the marriage lasts. So if you have a lot of people at your wedding, it's more likely to last longer. If you have few or no people, it's shorter, which could be a lot of other variables. But in that, there's also this sense of like, if you pledge to do something in front of nobody, it doesn't last. If you pledge to do something in front of a lot of people, you have to stick to it. And I think like there is, it can be both things, right? Where when you go out and you tell people another world is possible, you're trying to impress upon them, like, there are a lot of us. We're here. We're normal. Everybody is feeling this way. You should feel it too. While at the same time, it becoming an emotional truth for you as if by magic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And yet you have to say it in a rhyme. And you have to sing
Yeah.
it. And,
Yeah.
so like, I definitely think there are both of those elements together. Yeah.
Mm, yeah. I kind of feel like, in some ways, there's a more kind of general issue of secular people or non-religious people kind of lacking a vocabulary to talk about, or I mean, like, or it's difficult to sort of take these terms that are more religiously based or whatever, like magic or even like spirituality or transcendent or something. Yeah, but I mean, obviously, there are times where you know you almost have to reach for these words because there's nothing else sort of available.
Mm.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting thing. It's like, so in my own research, and amongst my colleagues, many of these terms are questioned, and in particular, magic. And I think as soon as you try to capture something that's very hard to pin down rationally, then people whose identity is very bound up with rationality become very uncomfortable with it. Um, I'm doing research at the moment, autoethnographic research into my geosciences faculty, into the myths, rituals, magic, and traditions here that shape our understanding of what sustainability is and how it should be achieved. And what I notice is that people love using these terms to describe their colleagues that they disagree with. Um, but they're not very good at reflecting on the maybe very positive myths and
Mm.
rituals that shape what they're doing. And so, quite literally, for those who thought people focusing on technological fixes was standing in the way of the rapid social transformations that we require to live more sustainably, they were saying, they just believe in the magic of techno fixes. But the other way around, they thought that we, because I'm one of them too, believed in the magic of hope and social change. Fortunately for me, I'm happy to say I do believe in the magic of that. But
Mhm.
Mm. Mhm.
And now it makes sense to hear it put that way. So, um,
Yeah.
and then have we talked about rituals? How are they connected? I think we've still got a couple things: rituals and tradition.
Yeah.
yeah, so rituals I think of as performances whereby you're trying to bring a person in line with a particular vision of how the world should or could be. And I follow a pretty standard format in describing that, as I've already referred to before, this Victor Turner thing, or I think initially Van Gennep thing, of the three phases of a ritual through alienation, liminality, and then kind of reintegration into a different social order. But again, I'm going too much into jargon there. So maybe I could tell you a story of why I started to think ritual was so profound and interesting. And it's actually a personal story of me and my partner, something that we still do, which is that if one of us, normally me, because I'm a very emotional chap, um, come home from work and, you know, behave a bit rudely or abruptly or unkindly, and suddenly we find ourselves in this kind of argument. You know, those kind of arguments where you just think, this is the night now, damn it. Like, there's just no way of getting out of this. No amount of I'm sorry is going to work somehow. Like, it's just damage is done. We'll be fine tomorrow. But so what we started doing then was whoever had come in through the door would then reverse out of the door backwards, uh, come, knock on it again, and just start all over again. And my point, and I put this in the book as well, is that time isn't erased, but the performance of erasing time somehow does make it erased in reality. And became really interested in the profound power of a ritual to perform into reality that which we know not to be real somehow. And so you can actually bring about the world that you want to see, bring your character in line with how you think people ought to be, simply by creating small rituals in which you do that. And they could be as small as a check-in at the beginning of a meeting where you decide to actually listen to the crap people say. One of the most common and boring, I think, comedian jokes, right, is that I asked somebody how they were doing, and they were annoying enough to actually tell me the full answer instead of
Yeah.
saying I'm fine. Well, the point of like an activist check-in is you actually for comic effect, I'll say waste 30 minutes at the beginning of a meeting listening to people tell
Yeah.
about a dream they had, or how they're feeling, or how something happened with their partner that upset them, that has nothing to do with what you're supposed to be discussing. And what you're doing is kind of ritually bringing into the room the notion that people's emotions are just as important as the intended outcomes for today.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. No, I think it's really important for, anyone in sort of in an atheist community or something, how to, even though it's, I guess, like the point of ritual is it's like non-rational, and yet it seems to be very effective. Um, I think let's just talk about tradition briefly, then we'll move on to our lightning
Oh
round.
yeah, sorry.
Yeah, I think, well, maybe just to set up, I think like tradition is interesting because for the atheist kind of perspective, for many atheists, I think specifically, they've probably thrown off the tradition that they were raised in. And there's sort of a matter of trying to build new traditions or something. So yeah, maybe talk to us about tradition.
Yeah, so in some sense, I think of tradition simply as the bringing together of myths, rituals, and magic. But what's important for me is that tradition is not just a collection of static objects or stories that are passed on from generation to generation, but that it's a process of choosing what to receive from the past, how to alter it for the present, and whether and how to pass it on to future generations. Um, Now, I hesitate when I start talking about it because I'm very interested in the point that you made with your audience in particular, that many of them may be deliberately trying to let go of tradition. And I think I have quite a self-selecting group when I start talking about how important tradition is for them, that they want stories of an origin that they are receiving. They want to work it through. They want to pass it on. But I think my argument for the book is that if you are somebody who considers tradition important, then the choice is not between that tradition that you left behind that you hate or none at all. Like, there are ways, there are not just many different stories and behaviors that can be inherited and passed on, but there are many different ways of doing that inheriting, some much more um, empowering and inclusive. So
Hmm.
can I stop there?
Yeah. Yeah. No, that
Yeah,
makes a lot of sense.
that works.
Yeah.
Um, so
Um,
Nathan, tell Tim about how the lightning round works.
yeah. So, yeah, we've got a lightning round before we conclude. It's called Can a True Atheist? And it's about whether a true atheist can do certain things, such as say, oh my God. It's just tongue in cheek. Uh, we're not going to hold you to this. So just give a short answer justifying uh, your answer. So yes, we've got a couple questions for you. So first one, the easiest perhaps: Can a true atheist believe in God?
Yes.
What?
Okay.
Okay, tell us more.
Do you want to expand? Yeah.
Um, I don't know. I variously linger between am I an atheist? Am I a Christian? Um, am I more of a pagan-y type person? Am I an atheist Christian pagan? Uh, so like for me, I've said this to Nathan before, but I'm never really that interested in whether or not somebody actually believes in something. I'm interested in the power that a story or a ritual has over somebody's life. So I don't know, rationally, I guess I am probably an atheist, but I do believe in belief. I believe in investing yourself emotionally in a story. So if you want that story to be a God story, um, it could be, even if you didn't really believe in it.
See, I see what you did there, Tim, and I should have expected this after magic became something that's not magic. But yeah, I see how you're working around it using words.
Well, no, no, because I mean, the thing for me is this is quite an important personal thing. Like, I'm somebody who deeply needs to give thanks to something, and often that's
Mm,
to God. And
mm.
I used to say, um, "Dear God, who I don't believe in, thanks for this,"
Mm,
because it made it easier for me to cope with the fact that I was talking to a being whose
mm,
existence I didn't believe in.
mm.
Uh,
Yeah.
Now I'm just comfortable with not really caring about the existence and just thinking that the act of appreciation is important.
Mm,
So
yeah,
yeah,
Mm-hmm.
maybe I'm failing my atheist exams here,
yeah.
but
No, I mean, so I thank everyone for the labor that they put into the particular object, and that might be a magical transformation as well. But Tim, the
Mm.
fascinating thing about this is the gimme, right? Like, see, there's nothing tricky going on here. I think this is the first time anyone's ever answered, yeah, an atheist can believe in God. This is the only one where we've had
Yes.
100% across the board, and now even that is gone.
Yes. Right. Yeah.
So okay, let's change it up a little bit. Can a true atheist believe in a noble lie, a particular narrative that isn't true but might be beneficial for society?
yeah, well, I mean, clearly based on my last answer, yes, I think they
Can a true atheist be worried about dying?
can. um, Yeah, because if you're someone like me, I grew up reading people like Nietzsche and stuff. I think like, how much time do I have left to have a meaningful impact uh, in the world? Because we all live on through our deeds. So um, I guess the notion, it's not that I'll look on afterwards, but I'll judge myself by that impending endpoint.
Hmm.
Yes. Right.
like,
Yeah.
like that it becomes about personal judgment, you judging yourself. That's the real problem with dying. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, if we could have a lightning round of therapy for me, I think that would be very helpful.
Well, here's one. Tim, can a true atheist believe in magic spells or like them actually having real world effect?
Hmm. When you added real world effect, that's a tough one.
Well, then what's the
Um,
difference between believing in magic? You don't mean that people just believe that they performed magic.
Gosh, yeah, I really don't know. Hmm.
When you think of like that kind of magic, either like, I don't know, like not Harry Potter, but or well, does paganism have magic spells or magic performances? Like chaos magic will have some sort of real world practices that are intended to have a
Yeah.
physical effect.
Well, I guess you can believe in it when all other options are expended. There's research from Irvine and Kyriakides that was looking into this, like when do magical practices become important in two contexts? I think it was Greece or Turkey and Scotland. And they were saying that, like, students, for example, will turn to magic when they've done all the studying they can. There's nothing else they can do. Um, and then they'll place their faith in this, like, rock or whatever, because, well, why not? Um, so, from that perspective, I, I don't know. I feel I live with a lot of contradictions, and I'm also okay with that. So, I think maybe this whole thing is made problematic by the fact that I'm not so. I don't know if it matters to me that I'm a true atheist. Like,
Mm-hmm.
but anyway,
Yeah,
Hmm.
we're not burdened by
Yes.
such rules. Don't worry about it.
Yeah. Okay. Um, can a true atheist be a capitalist or an anti-capitalist?
um, well, everybody should be an anti-capitalist, of course, but no. Can a true atheist be a capitalist or an anti-capitalist? So, uh, I guess they could be both, couldn't they?
At the same
Um,
time, you are a man of multitudes.
no, they could be one or the other. I guess is what I thought. But yeah, maybe they could be both too. Uh,
Okay. Can a true atheist reject the idea of freedom of religion?
hmm. Would that also imply like freedom for religion? So like,
Yeah. Yeah. Like religious freedom for so the religion can act independently.
so I would say yes, they can reject it. Like, I wouldn't call a murderous atheist anti-religious person not a true atheist. I'd just call them a murderer.
Right. Yeah.
So,
Yes. Yeah. Okay.
okay.
All right. And okay, last but not least, can a true atheist think that life has no purpose?
Definitely. Because I don't think that comes. I paused for a long time because I was really confounded recently when, and this is as a result of reading my book, because I was kind of talking about how, the whole thing in a sense is premised on like, well, everyone needs meaning. So, regardless of whether there's purpose in life, I feel like life has to have some meaning. And a friend was saying to me, like, well, I don't think life has any meaning. So I was really taken aback because I thought, I don't know, my whole identity has been based around this idea of like, yeah, well, I'm sort of an atheist, but my life has meaning, and you can't take that away from me.
Yeah.
Um,
Yes.
but then someone was like, no, I don't have meaning, and I'm fine with that. I was like, oh, okay.
Hmm.
That's pretty
Yeah.
amazing. Well, you've just created
Yeah.
some meaning here, meaning what it is to be a true
Yeah.
atheist. Through our ritual, we have performed the
Yeah.
magic
Right. Yes.
and transformed what an
Yeah.
atheist is into what a true atheist is and is not. So, Tim, this has been fantastic. Thank you so much for coming on.
No, thank you. It's been really fun meeting you guys.
Right. That was Timothy Stacey. Really fascinating discussion.
Yeah.
Todd, what were some of your takeaways?
Well, I mean, the first thing that kind of jumped out to us is the terminology, right? It's things that we're,
Hmm.
as atheists, we're allergic to. This idea of like the importance of
Yeah.
myth and magic. But digging into it, it really fits more as a description of how people function,
Hmm.
and it
Hmm.
creates a toolkit for how we can interact in a group that would make the group stronger, make the group last. I mean, we've talked a lot about it in terms of, in atheist group and the high turnover and how there's been this, I don't want to say tradition, maybe we should call it tradition of like, atheist groups being very alienating. I think we've both seen that. And a lot of what he's talking about is how to overcome that. And I think that's
Yeah.
really, it's really important and it's really thought out. And I think I
Hmm.
get the sense that it's really useful, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I think so. Yeah. Because I think it's there's some practical things, or like practical ideas, I guess, about how to kind of incorporate some of these things. Like, I mean, to make like membership in the group kind of meaningful, rather than like the sort of super rational thing of like, let's go to a talk and sit there and learn about science and then I'll return. But there's something about like how to build relationships within the group, and yeah, how to make it meaningful when you attend and so on.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And I mean,
Hmm.
if people are worried about that, one of the things that I started thinking through, like, and I talked about it one time, is that, there are also rational explanations for these things. And sort of those, they can be instrumental, right? Like you can use
Yeah.
this just as a tool to do a thing. Like he says, like
Hmm.
listening to someone complain for a half hour. It's
Yeah.
really powerful. It's really helpful. Maybe that's what the person
Hmm.
needs. That's
Yeah.
going to make a group more powerful. And like if you go through toolbooks on, like, not toolbooks. What even is a toolbook?
Textbook.
No, I
Is
think it was more like
that
a
what you mean?
toolkit of like
Toolkit.
like
Okay.
how do we build and organize these groups and think it through,
Yeah.
like their elements like that we should have in there. And I really hope that like people who are looking to maybe work through one particular problem, that they're able to try these different aspects, right? In terms of, and even if you're not thinking about it in terms of myth making, you're just thinking about it in terms of like telling your story. You're not thinking about it in terms of magic. You're just, you know, taking a moment to appreciate like that we're all together, that we're sharing a room like that. It makes sense, right? There's an emotional connection there that's worth exploring.
Yeah. Yeah. To create kind of like profound experiences and so on. Yeah. I mean, there's so many interesting things. Like, I did like the thing he talked about, he did with his partner about like, you know, reversing out of the room if
Yeah.
you've had, if, and then like coming back in. And I think it's like, it's pretty, I mean, it would be interesting to know like how he and his partner started doing that. But I think it's like, everyone recognizes like there's a little bit of like silliness to it. Like, obviously it's not changing anything, but in a way it actually does. And I think, yeah, there's something to that idea of like the sort of the power of like rituals or whatever, that sort of transcends like rationality, I suppose. Even though our kind of community, I think, is so places such a high value on rationality.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Mhm.
And I mean that there is um like, yeah, I mean those it was able to address a lot of the things that we were concerned with, right? About that rationality and about things like tradition, right? We're trying to escape a tradition. It's like, well, you can rationally just make up a new one and do things that you like and find ways to
Mhm.
transmit them to other people. There's nothing wrong with that. I mean, I
Yeah.
think, I still celebrate a version of Christmas, right?
Mhm.
That's totally different from the way my family did it. And I think even something as like strong as Christmas, if you walk it back, maybe even two, but definitely like three generations in your family, it would be unrecognizable to them,
Yeah, right.
right?
Yeah.
Like it's something that we
Yeah.
treat this tradition as eternal and solid and unchanging, and it doesn't
Yes.
last a single generation. Every
Right.
every every family,
Yeah.
brothers and sisters, everybody does it differently. It'll
Hmm.
have some of the same elements, but and maybe the same appearance, but beyond that, it changes dramatically from one generation to the next. So much so that
Hmm.
I don't think past generations would recognize it at all. And we have
Yeah.
the ability to do that with anything. If you're when
Hmm.
you're leaving your church and you join an atheist organization, you get that freedom to just mutate it into its next
Yeah.
evolutionary design. And like as atheists, we
Mm.
should embrace that. I do.
Yeah.
I've started doing with my family. We like a version of Yule
Oh,
on the
okay.
solstice, right? It's
So
like
what does that entail?
well, actually, it's a lot of magic, but it's also like
Ah,
magic in that sense of like it doesn't really have any power, but like it's sort of like a emotionally helpful. I mean, so to get into a little bit of the ideas of practical magic, man, this
mhm.
this conversation took a turn, huh? Basically,
Uh-huh.
winter sucks, right? It's dark and it's
Yeah.
cold. So you go out, you have a
Mhm.
big fire. That's nice. And you
Yeah.
just write down things that you want to get rid of for the year. A piece of
Mhm.
paper. You don't show it to anybody. And then you burn
Yes.
it.
Right.
Right? And
Yeah. Yeah.
like
Yeah.
it's not there's no sense that okay, the universe is listening. The universe can read that note and make these problems go away. You know exactly what you're doing psychologically, right? You're saying this is a thing I don't like. I'm going to give myself time to focus on it. This is what I want to have happen, and this is how I'm going to actualize it. And you're going through
Mhm.
this whole process.
Mhm.
Um, and like I would not describe it as magic because what I'm doing is not magic. It's a very
Right.
rational process. But what
Yeah.
Tim's discussion is, what? Yeah, it's this feeling, that you're doing something that's impossible. You're making this tremendous
Right.
change through this outside
Yeah.
force that's completely unknowable. It's the same thing as magic.
Mhm.
Um, but
Yeah.
yeah, like I understand both sides of that, but also it's dark, it's cold. I want to have a fire and I want to get rid of,
Yeah.
personal baggage.
Yeah.
It's nothing like
Yeah.
that makes sense. And if it becomes a true, you ritualize it and it becomes a tradition and you pass it on, and it's completely divorced from religion, what's wrong with that?
Yes.
It's great.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I agree.
Well,
And how long have you been doing that tradition?
1 year.
Okay. Yeah, I mean,
No, I think we've
but I
done
think
it. We've done it a
okay.
couple times now.
Okay.
It's cathartic,
Yeah.
you know?
Yes. Yeah. Yeah, I think it's again, even though like, it's not you could in theory, just as easily just say in your head, I'm going to stop or thinking about such and such thing or whatever. But like there is something like, writing it and crumpling it up and throwing it into the fire
Oh,
that
yeah, totally. Why? And
um
watching it burn? Yeah, it's
yeah.
gone.
And again, and we can probably think about rationally why that would be, why that makes it more powerful. But then it's almost like why even it's not even necessary really to think about it too much. It just is the way it is, I guess.
Yeah. And
Um
the way Tim discussed it, like we have this already. And he's absolutely right. You have things like, Malcolm Gladwell with, oh, you need 10,000 hours. No, you don't. That's a made
mm,
up number. Doesn't really
mhm.
reflect anything. It's magical, right? You get to 10,000 hours, right? Or if, oh, you need some exercise, you need to get 10,000 steps in a day.
Right,
Like
yeah.
we know these
Yeah,
like
that's
how are they these perfect round numbers, right?
yeah.
Right, what is it,
Yeah,
what's the difference between 9,999 and 10,001,
right.
right? Like
Yeah.
we know that it is imbued with this sort of magical thinking. You do this, this thing in
Mhm.
exactly this way, and poof, you get this special outcome. But we can
Yeah.
also say, well, rationally, if you get 10,000 steps in a day, you're doing more than enough
Right.
to promote a healthy lifestyle. If you're spending
Yeah.
10,000 hours doing something, you're going to get better at it. Like,
Yeah.
there's this rationality to it.
Mhm.
It works both ways, but the thing that makes it stick is this sort of magical incantation it has about it. It's a
Mhm.
neat observation, and it's we
It
don't need
is.
to.
Yeah.
When we throw out ideas of magic, I mean, I think we're resistant to things like crystals. I need
Right.
sandalwood
Right.
to protect me from the evil eye. Like,
Mhm.
yeah, okay. Like, we're all together on
Yeah.
that one. But the idea of
Yeah.
how ritual practices can change us either psychologically or help us bind as a community, it's an important thing to at least investigate.
Mhm. Yeah. I think it's something I'll probably notice more and more as I think about it. Yeah. 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 So that was a really interesting discussion, and
It was
yeah,
fruitful in
check out.
ways, unexpected ways,
Yeah.
and I think that's what I appreciate
Yeah.
most.
Yeah. So check out Tim's book. We'll link it below. And yeah, so we want to thank our Patreon
As
supporters
always, thank you guys so
and
much.
in general the audience for listening.
Absolutely, we would
And
we would just be crazy people in a room
yes,
talking without you guys.
yeah,
And
yes,
always love hearing from you. Don't be afraid to reach out if you have any
mm-hmm,
complaints. Nath G Alexander at the Twitters.
yep.
And as always, big thanks to Atheist United. Are they? Do you know? Are they still doing their big money drive? You know what? Doesn't matter.
They're probably perpetually looking
Doesn't
for money.
matter if they're doing it now.
So
Just go over,
yeah,
throw them a few
yeah,
bucks. If you've got a lot, if you've
yes,
got money lying around, throw them a couple dollars. They're going to put it to good use. They got a lot of work to do
hmm
out there. Um, and yeah, I'm feeling good, Nathan. How do you feel?
feeling good.
All
Yep.
right. Then thanks everybody for listening, and talk to you later. Bye bye.